everybody, and welcome back to Flock's Nest Sports Podcast. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Dallas, repping 52 of the Baltimore Ravens, Ray Lewis.
As always, I'm your host, Brendan, repping 54, Bobby Wagner of the Seattle Seahawks.
We got a great episode for you guys today. We are finally getting back on track, so we are going to talk some basketball and some hockey, as well as what happened in week 2 of the NFL's free agency and open league. So we are going to hop right in, starting with basketball. Brendan, what news?
So it's been a long time in between our talking of basketball. The NBA trade deadline happened. Thankfully, it was a pretty uneventful trade deadline. We're just going to cover a quick couple of moves that were probably the biggest of the bunch, just to quickly talk about those. And then we have one more thing of news for basketball, and then we'll kind of get into how it's been going recently and how it's shaping up for playoffs here in a couple months. So the first move we'll talk about, again, these were months ago, but the Golden State Warriors acquired Kristaps Porzingis from the Atlanta Hawks in exchange for Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield. Obviously, Porzingis is a good center in the league. Golden State needed a solid center, so they make the move for Porzingis. So far, it's worked out all right for them. Truthfully, I have not watched a lot of Atlanta Hawks basketball this season, so I cannot say how Kuminga or Hield has done for them. But we'll kind of have to wait and see there. The other move kind of worth talking about was the Memphis Grizzlies trading Jaren Jackson Jr., one of the best defensive players in the NBA, to the Utah Jazz. There were some other people in the trade, but it was really Jaren Jackson Jr. For 3 first-round picks, and then there was a bunch of other moving pieces, but none of them really matter. It kind of just boiled down to Jaren Jackson Jr. for the 3 first-round picks. So Memphis had been going full rebuild, and we're just kind of trading everybody. They did not end up trading Ja Morant, which was kind of a big thing in the deadline. That he was possibly going to get moved. He wasn't. And then those were pretty much the only 2 big moves that happened because everyone thought Giannis was going to get traded, and then he wasn't. So we'll kind of see again what happens there this offseason with the whole Giannis situation. But that was pretty much the deadline. There was not a ton of big moves this year. It was kind of just bottom of the roster shuffling for the most part.
Yeah, definitely thought Giannis was going to be dealt. I think at this point, I'm not saying things won't change, but he isn't asking to go away. He isn't asking to leave Milwaukee. I think if he was, we would definitely see that move happen. Personally, I think he needs to, but we haven't seen it yet, so we will continue to keep an eye on that. Porzingis to the Hawks. I think Porzingis is a good player. When you are on the Celtics, that's a lot of talent, so you don't quite get as much playing time, but he's more of a break guy kind of guy anyway, so hopefully that goes well for him. Like Brendan, I don't watch a ton of Atlanta Hawks basketball, so
yeah, don't really care that much. The other piece of news that happened recently was the NBA will hold a vote at the Board of Governors meetings this March to explore adding 2 new expansion teams to the league. Those expansion teams will likely be in Las Vegas and Seattle. So Seattle will get a team back. Obviously, they had the Supersonics before they moved to Oklahoma City, but they'll get them back. And then Las Vegas will get a new NBA team. That vote is again happening in March. It is the 24th and the 25th. But those 2 franchises won't come into existence until the 2028-2029 season if they are voted in by the board. So we'll kind of see. It would be kind of exciting to get some new teams in the NBA. It's been a long time for them. And then obviously the city of Seattle loved the Supersonics. So they're kind of looking to get that team back. And then Las Vegas has obviously, in recent times, turned into a really big sports city. with all their new franchises. So adding a basketball team there for the men's side would not be the most surprising thing. So um, I would expect this to go through. I expect these two new teams to join in the 2028 season, but we'll have to kind of wait and see. When that vote happens, we'll probably tell y'all what happened.
Yeah. A little surprised they want to add teams rather than move to existing teams, just because the league is already quite large. But I think it's great that those two cities could potentially get a team. Obviously, yes, I think Seattle was kind of devastated when the Supersonics left and would be excited to get a team back. As for Vegas, they've proved with the Raiders and the Kings the Knights, the Golden Knights, that they love having sports teams.
Yeah,
They've really kind of built that city into a sports city, and so yes, I think that would be great. I'm sure they'd love to have one, and I have a hard time imagining it's not successful. So,
that. So,
um,
but that's kind of it for the news. In terms of where we stand going into where we're at here in March, we're coming down the stretch of the season. In the East, right now, the playoff picture would look like the Detroit Pistons are leading the way at the 1 seed. The Celtics are in the 2 seed. With the return of Jason Tatum, the Celtics are going to be an interesting team. Tatum has been playing. I think he's still on a minutes restriction right now, but he's at least back with the team, so that's really interesting. You have the Knicks in the 3 seed, the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 4 seed, the Toronto Raptors in the 5 seed, the Orlando Magic in the 6 seed, and then your play-in is looking like the Miami Heat, Atlanta Hawks, Philadelphia 76ers, and the Charlotte Hornets. Um, and I truthfully don't really see that changing. The Bucks are the next closest team, the Bucks and the Bulls, but they're both 7 games behind Charlotte. So I don't really see them making the comeback at this point, but it's still possible. But yeah, and that's how the playoffs look in the East.
yeah, not really surprised by it. I don't expect it to change. It's kind of your typical grouping. They're good teams, great franchises, and they've been good for a long time. I do agree. Tatum's return is interesting with how quickly he has come back, as well as how we saw Brown play really well without him, and in his absence to now be expected to kind of share the load. They're both best when they have the ball in their hands, and how that's going to continue to work, and to see how his recovery continues to go.
Yeah, and then the other 3 teams in the East that weren't mentioned were the Brooklyn Nets, Washington Wizards, and the Indiana Pacers. All 3 of them have been eliminated from playoff contentions, so their seasons are pretty much done at this point.
For the
They are
Pacers, that's a hard, long fall with
yeah.
Halliburton's injury.
You go from NBA championship runner up to last in the NBA in a matter of a season. That's rough. Obviously, no Halliburton does change that. So
Yep.
he probably won't come back this season at this point, just with how bad they are. But based on how Tatum healed from his injury, I imagine Halliburton will be back fully healthy next season, and will probably be pretty good. So
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, there's nothing wrong with having a full 2 off seasons and a full season to rest, heal, recover, and just make sure he's squared away when he does carry that team, and to get them back to where they want to be. And now they kind of know what it looks like without him, and hopefully they can use this off season to build that up a bit.
and they are in pole position to get the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, in the NBA, it is a lottery system, so they're not guaranteed that, but they are going to have the best odds. So that will also really help their chances next year. In the West,
Yeah.
again, it's kind of been the same all season. Oklahoma City Thunder lead the way. San Antonio is right behind them, and then it's Los Angeles, the Lakers, the Houston Rockets, the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and then in the play-in, it's the Phoenix Suns, Los Angeles Clippers, Golden State Warriors, and Portland Trailblazers. Again, I don't expect much to change here, considering the next teams are all 10 games away from Portland. So I don't expect the comebacks there, but it's still possible, I guess, for the Grizzlies, Pelicans, and Mavericks. But I do not expect that.
Yeah, another one. Kind of what we expected a few weeks ago. The order on some of it does surprise me a little bit. The Nuggets have been beat up, so I understand a little bit more there. But it's kind of your typical contenders sitting at the top. Always great teams, and
Yeah.
they've played really well this season.
The really cool one for me is San Antonio with Wemby kind of leading the way.
Yeah.
Obviously, have not been great the past couple seasons, but now he's got that team playing really well, along with some other young guys. And then the other teams that are both out of it are the Utah Jazz and the Sacramento Kings. Or the Jazz have not been eliminated, but they might as well have been. And then the Kings have been eliminated. So we are in the final stretch of the season. For the NBA. It is a long one. I'm looking forward to the playoffs, but they cannot come fast enough. We're in the kind of the boring stretch for basketball, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's always kind of a sweet spot with basketball. There's like the beginning is kind of boring because there's so many games. And then the middle section when everyone's kind of fighting for playoff spots, playoff contention. You have the NBA Cup is really great. And then that spot right before the playoffs, where teams are often resting star players, eliminated teams are kind of figuring out what to do and how to move forward. And it's kind of a dull time before we kick off the playoffs.
Yeah. But thankfully, college basketball is here to save the day as March Madness is starting tomorrow. So we'll definitely be talking about the tournament as it gets going. We are not going to fill out a 64 team bracket today. That would take a long time.
No.
But with that starting up, we'll be excited to talk about that for the coming weeks. Obviously, March Madness is one of the best tournaments in the world, really. But yeah, so with the NBA kind of being on a lull going into the playoffs, it's nice to have college basketball kind of take over for a little bit.
Yep. I think what we'll probably do, which is kind of a tied and true system, just tested for the kid and I. It's a little easier. He will do men's, I will do women's, and we're going to keep it pretty simple.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's it for basketball. It's kind of been eventful, not really. So we'll kind of see where the NBA goes once we hit the playoffs. And then obviously, with March Madness around the corner, should be great.
And this is a great time to get into kind of some of those other sports if you are like us, just eagerly awaiting football. Speaking of other sports, we will kick it into hockey.
Yeah, and again, in between us talking about hockey last, their trade deadline has happened. So we'll kind of go through again some of the bigger moves from the deadline. Probably won't cover them all, but we'll cover the main ones. So we'll start with the first trade, which is the Dallas Stars are trading a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick to Vancouver in exchange for Tyler Myers. Tyler Myers is just a tall, big defenseman. Those kind of go for a premium come the trade deadline because every team in the NHL decides kind of in unison that once we get to the playoffs, you want to be bigger, stronger, rather than maybe faster. So that's obviously a move there for the Stars to get just bigger and stronger.
Yeah. Playoffs for hockey are very physical, so that's not an outlandish perspective, and hopefully not really in this team's case, but from their perspective, hopefully it will help. As close as they got last year, hoping to get a little closer.
Yeah. And then The next move is another kind of big one. It is the Utah Mammoth are trading Ollie Mata, Jonathan Castagna, and 3 second-round picks in exchange for Mackenzie Weegar from the Calgary Flames. For the Flames, they get 3 second-round picks for a team that is one of the worst in the NHL. Getting more picks kind of help start their rebuild. Not a bad idea. Castagna, I think, is just a prospect. Don't know a ton about him in terms of being a prospect. And then Ollie Mata is a fine player, but nothing major. And then Mackenzie Weegar, the main thing in this deal. He's a good defenseman. Should really help Utah's back end for their push to the playoffs. Obviously, they're kind of in that playoff position right now. So he'll help their back end in the playoffs.
Yeah, both good players. It's just kind of an easy trade as both teams try to rebuild.
Yeah. The next one was one of the more surprising moves of the deadline, just because you'd never think of this guy getting traded. And that is the Anaheim Ducks have traded for John Carlson, the defenseman from the Washington Capitals, in exchange for a first-round pick in 2026 or 2027. There are conditions to that. I don't know what the conditions are, but it'll be whatever it is. The conditions will just push it to 2027, and it'll be unconditioned, and then a 2027 third. So, John Carlson being the main part of this trade going to Anaheim is a big move for them. He's a very experienced, great defenseman, has a lot of experience to what is a very young team. So I think that is great. For the Capitals, this is a weird one. They're a team that I think is sitting within the playoff picture right now. And obviously Carlson has been great for them for a long time. It was loved by that locker room. So not one that I think makes a ton of sense for Washington. But again, if you're Washington, you don't know how much longer Ovechkin has, and you really don't know how much longer your window is going to be open. So I guess maybe they're just trying to get ahead of that. I really don't know for Washington why you would do this. But for Anaheim, I think this is a great move just to add real veteran leadership on that back end.
Yeah, for Anaheim, like you said, and like we talked about the last time we talked hockey, Anaheim is very young, came out really strong, and we saw them kind of lose that luster about halfway through the season. Veteran leadership is what's going to help maintain that and maintain it into the playoffs. As for Washington, they're kind of an older team, so I think this helps them work on getting a little younger, getting some fresh blood into there. I'm a little surprised at the name. Like you said, really popular, really talented, but I understand the concept of wanting to get a little younger. Just surprised at how they went about it.
Yeah. The next one is one that I never thought I'd say, and it's the Buffalo Sabres were buyers at the deadline, and they picked up Logan Stanley and Luke Shen, 2 defensemen, from the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for a second-round pick, a defenseman, Jacob Bryson, and then a left winger, Isaac Rosen. Both of those guys are just prospects in Buffalo. So they should be young guys to come help kind of propel the Jets forward. But for Buffalo, adding 2 more D-men to their lineup, not a bad idea, especially when you consider nobody thought Buffalo was going to be in the playoffs this season. So they're trying to maximize this kind of momentum they have as they're one of the hottest teams in the NHL this year. They've been great. It was kind of weird that they just did it all of a sudden. So I think they're just trying to maximize that momentum and kind of ride it into the playoffs. And I think their trade kind of signifies that.
And Buffalo is usually really quiet at the trade deadline. That's kind of a testament to how well they've done over the last few seasons. So to now actually be in a playoff spot, seems like they're handling it well. Good luck.
Yeah. The next trade we'll talk about. Interestingly enough, the NHL trade deadline kind of sucked this year. There was not very many big trades or very many trades at all. There's really 2 we're talking about. We'll start with this one, and that is the St. Louis Blues send Braden Shen to the New York Islanders in exchange for Jonathan Drouin, a 2026 first, a third-round pick, and Marcus Gidloff. Now, for New York, they're getting a pretty experienced defenseman, and then for St. Louis, they're getting a decent forward in Drouin, a first, a third, and then probably someone that is not going to see the ice very much in Gidloff, but if he had to, he could for them. This trade did not make a ton of sense from either side, really. For New York, I don't know why you would give up a first and some other big pieces when I don't think they're going to be challenging for the cup this year. Like, they're in a playoff spot, but they're just hanging on, and they've relied so heavily on goaltending that I don't get moving on from a first and moving on from all these things when you have a young team anyway, and you can build a young team up with the momentum they've had. So this one doesn't make a ton of sense. And then for St. Louis, I think they got a pretty decent haul here where they're getting some decent contributors now, and obviously a first-round pick. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I definitely think St. Louis kind of won this one. Getting a lot of stuff, able to kind of move forward. Not really sure what's going on the back end of that one.
Yeah, that one was a little weird. And then the last trade we'll talk about on trade deadline was the biggest trade and was the trade that happened last. It was the last trade to be processed during the deadline, and that is the Colorado Avalanche are trading for Nazem Kadri. Obviously, spent 2022 spent quite a few years with the team, including 2022 when they won the Cup, and that's when he left and joined Calgary. In the trade, the Colorado Avalanche are getting Nazem Kadri and a 2027 fourth-round pick in exchange for a 2028 first, a 2027 second, Victor Olofsson, Max Curran, and then Calgary is also retaining 20% of the salary throughout the duration of his deal. So that's what was able to make the deal go through. That's also why it is a more expensive trade than I think a lot of people would think, is because of that retaining of salary. But for Calgary, we'll start there. I think this is a good move for them. They are not in a position to contend right now. So getting picks, getting a young, good prospect in Curran, and then adding Victor Olofsson, I get like that's just to make the cap work. But again, that's a fine if you end up resigning him. Sure, if not, it was just to make the money work. So for them, this makes a ton of sense, adding those pieces. And then for the Avalanche, you're the best team in the league. Adding Kadri, I think, just makes it so that your forward depth is one of the best in the NHL, if not the best. And you're really just going off of pure vibes right now because everyone in that locker room loved him, and now he's back with that core. And I think this move really showed that the Avs are just going for it this year, and they're just pushing it all into the table and going, if we lose, we lose.
Yeah.
So.
No, Kadri was a big part of that Cup quest and win in 2022. If you're an Avs fan like we are, you're a big fan of Kadri. He's a great player. He's a great defenseman. Sometimes his temperament can be an issue, but he's kind of grown up a lot in the last couple of years. As for Calgary, yeah, you need more capital in terms of draft picks and players to be a true contender, and shopping from Denver is a great place to start.
Yeah. And then the last bit of breaking news does not come from the trade deadline. It actually happened recently. That is the Toronto Maple Leafs have confirmed that their captain, Austin Matthews, is not going to finish out the season. He avoided a serious ACL or PCL injury, but it is still bad enough that they're just going to shut him down. The Leafs suck this year anyway. They weren't going to make the playoffs. They shut him down, make sure they don't injure that knee worse. So unfortunate. The play was dirty. I would not be surprised if the player that uh, perpetrated it, was suspended. I have not seen anything on that, but it was a dirty play, knee on knee. It really sucks that Matthews is out.
It was a terrible play, and while yes, the Maple Leafs were not going to make the playoffs this year, I think it's better they rest him. But also, one of the biggest critiques of hockey as an avid fan is the player safety committee. I know some of Matthews' teammates have already come down with criticism on this, is that this needs to be handled appropriately, and that is not the player safety committee's strong suit. So hopefully there are real, genuine consequences to this, as the play was unnecessary. It's not a hockey play. This was deliberate and blatant.
Yeah.
And there should be consequences.
And while we're talking about his teammates, y'all need to buck the fuck up, because in hockey, it is pretty standard that if one of your players gets hurt, you probably fight the dude that did the hurting.
Yeah.
Nobody did anything. So, your captain got hurt. I don't know why y'all are just standing there doing nothing about it. So,
yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
That, I think, tells you the state of this Toronto Maple Leafs team. That the captain of their team and their best player goes down with injury after a dirty play, and not a soul on the team did anything about it.
Yeah.
During the game.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why they cannot win a cup.
Yes.
There's also an extreme lack of talent, but that's a separate conversation.
But sometimes you don't need that much talent.
Sometimes you need to be willing to throw gloves.
But yeah, just a small thing. But that was it for the breaking news portion, I guess, of the NHL. In terms of where we stand going into the playoffs, we sit currently in the East in the East, we sit with Buffalo leading the way in their division, followed by Tampa Bay and the Montreal Canadiens. So those three teams are currently in a playoff spot. And then in the Metropolitan, it's the Carolina Hurricanes, Pittsburgh Penguins, New York Islanders sitting in a playoff spot. And then the two wild cards are the Detroit Red Wings and the Boston Bruins. There's still a lot to be shaken up with the East right now in terms of playoff spots. You have Columbus sitting only 1 point behind for a wild card spot. Ottawa is right there, can make a push. Beyond that, it'll be really tough for like the Flyers to make it or the Capitals, but they still could. And then the Devils, I doubt it. Maple Leafs, I doubt it. The Panthers, I think, are done, and the Rangers are pretty much done. So the East is going to shake out a little differently this year, obviously, with the Florida Panthers not making it after winning back-to-back cups.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see those teams that have played really well, been at the top of the league, top of the mountain, and now probably aren't going to make the playoffs.
Yeah. Just kind of crazy. In the West, again, not much has changed. The Avalanche still leading the way in the Central, followed by the Stars, who are right there, and then the Minnesota Wild, who are also right there. Those three teams are still tops of the NHL, along with Buffalo and Carolina. But those three teams kind of lead the way. In the Pacific Division, Anaheim leads that right now, followed by Edmonton and Vegas. So those six teams are looking pretty safe for a playoff spot. In the wild card right now, the Utah Mammoth sit at the first spot, and then the Seattle Kraken sit at the next one. But there's still a lot to happen here, as the Kraken are currently tied with the Kings for a wild card. And then San Jose is only 1 point behind. Nashville's only 2 points behind. Winnipeg's only 4 points behind. There's a lot of movement that could happen within the wild card in the West. There are some teams that are pretty much out of it. I doubt St. Louis is going to make it there. I doubt Chicago. The Flames and the Vancouver Canucks have pretty much been eliminated, if not officially. So it's been been a pretty decent season. Not a ton has happened in terms of from what we last talked. Most of the standings have stayed relatively the same. So we'll kind of see where we go from here as we get the push towards the playoffs.
Yeah, it's been a good season of hockey, but it's been a pretty tame one. Everyone's just kind of maintaining their level of play, and
I think it's kind
we're
of just
continuing to see that.
I think the Olympic break had a lot to do with that. I think you kind of
Agreed.
saw that teams that were going into it well kind of kept going, and teams that didn't go into it well stayed
Have
where
really
they were.
fallen off.
And like no team has come out of it and looked bad. No team has come out of it and looked really good. Everyone just kind of stayed the same, which was kind of interesting this year for that break.
Yeah, we usually see a little fluctuation after the break, but everyone kind of hit the ground running. So it's just been a great year of hockey, great season. Cavs are kind of flying high right now, and hopefully they maintain that.
Yeah, and obviously, once we get to the playoffs, hockey is going to get significantly better than it is right now, and it is already still really good. But again, we're in the home stretch towards the playoffs for the NHL, so should be good.
We are indeed. Well, with that kind of wrapping it up for hockey this week, we will move on to the NFL, which is in the midst of week 2 of league opening, which means free agency and things like that have still been going on. So we're going to talk some breaking news and then our teams.
Yeah. So significantly less news than last week. Kind of expected for week 2 to kind of slow down a little bit, but there's still some interesting moves. We'll start with one. The Pittsburgh Steelers have signed defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph Day to a 2-year, $11 million deal, $6 million guarantee, including $6 million this year. It's a fine signing for the Steelers. Their defensive line's always been pretty solid, so just adding another guy to that rotation shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah.
Next, the Jets are making another defensive move. They're bringing back Andre Cisco to a 1-year deal worth up to $5.25 million for a secondary that needs some work. Bringing back a guy is an interesting choice, but again, for depth, it's probably not a bad idea.
Depth is really the big part of building at this point in the NFL.
Yeah. The Tennessee Titans have agreed a restructured contract with Calvin Ridley, keeping him in Tennessee for the 2026 season. Calvin Ridley did not have a great season last year. I think Tennessee is going to expect a lot more from him. He is the veteran in that building at the wide receiver position, whether that's good or bad. Not really sure. But hopefully he can have a bounce back year with the Titans.
And they gave him a fuck ton of money. So they're going to want more than what they got.
Yeah. Next, we have a trade. It's a very weird trade. The Kansas City Chiefs are sending a 6th-round pick to the New York Jets. A 6th-round pick in 2027 to the New York Jets in exchange for Justin Fields. Obviously, with Mahomes' injury, we're not sure if he's going to start the season. I think this is the Chiefs' way of having at least somebody that can start the season if needed, and then they have their backup. Obviously, they lost Gardner Minshew in free agency, so if all else fails, he will just be their backup. But it is still kind of an interesting move for the Chiefs.
Yeah. You have questions at quarterback right now just because you don't know what his timeline is going to be, if he's going to start the season or not in terms of Mahomes. As for Justin Fields, you should wildly take this opportunity.
Yeah, this is
to learn and absorb as much as you can. If you can spend 1-2 seasons here, the likelihood of you getting another opportunity to start skyrockets. Unfortunately, for a backup playing behind Mahomes means the likelihood that you play a ton isn't high, depending on whether or not he starts the season. but this is the time to sit back and learn. And I
And
think that's something that Fields desperately needs.
yeah,
So
this
really,
is
really take this opportunity.
this is a great opportunity for Fields to develop and learn under one of the best offensive minds in football. So should be good.
100%.
Next is the 49ers have signed wide receiver Christian Kirk to a 1-year, $6 million deal. The 49ers have decided that their solution to the wide receiver position is a bunch of old veterans. Not sure if that's the right move, but they're doing it, so go them.
Yeah. I don't know. Good luck.
Yeah, that's about what I got for you.
After the Ayuk debacle, I understand having questions at wide receiver. I'm just not sure that this was the move.
Yeah. The next move is another trade. This one is the Denver Broncos are sending a first-round pick this year, a third-rounder, and a fourth-rounder this year to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for wide receiver Jalen Waddle and the Dolphins' fourth-round pick this year. So the Broncos add a big-time pass catcher for Bo Nix, and the Dolphins kind of continue their theme of tearing it down this season. I think starting with the Dolphins, I think this is a very good move for them. Again, just where they're at as a team, they had to commit to a rebuild, and I'm glad they realized that. A lot of teams don't do this, don't commit to rebuilding, and they get stuck in the purgatory that is, being just good enough to keep yourself from having a premium draft pick. So for the Dolphins to kind of fully commit is probably the right move. And then for the Broncos, adding Jalen Waddle, getting Bo Nix another weapon is not a bad idea, and hopefully this kind of open up the Broncos pass game a little bit more.
Yeah. Obviously, with J.K. Dobbins kind of having some injuries, they re-sign him, but they get another kind of power back. Waddle's really fast, quick on his feet, finds holes really well. I think that's a great addition for the Broncos. As for the Dolphins, look, at this point, they have about $108 million in dead cap going into this year. That can be terrifying for owners and GMs and head coaches, and for kind of an entirely new staff to commit to this, to say this is how we're going to be the best franchise we can be moving forward, is really impressive. I respect it. Something other teams probably should have done a long time ago. I think they're kind of looking at the Broncos going, hey, look, they've done it. Other teams have had success. So we will see. But they've definitely committed.
Yeah, they've committed to a full teardown. So it'll be interesting to see what else they can do. And I would not be surprised if come next year they are sitting at the top of the draft.
Yeah.
Next move is the Eagles have signed a 1-year deal with Hollywood Brown. With the shit show that is their wide receiver room, I don't know why you would add another shit show at wide receiver, but to each their own.
Look, I'm so confused about what the Eagles want at the wide receiver position beyond divas that are hit or miss. Because that's kind of what you get. I've been hard on Hollywood. I will continue to do so. 1, don't come for my quarterback. 2, you drop the ball a lot. And when you have an A.J. Brown situation already, I'm not sure why you would add to that room, especially when you haven't dealt A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, me included, expected that to be a piece that first week of the league opening and free agency. He hasn't been. This move I get if you had dealt AJ. Because you haven't, I'm just a little confused.
Yeah, it's the Eagles are interesting, always. I'll give them that. They are never boring. They're
never boring.
They never lack drama. So we'll see what happens there. The next one is the Texans have agreed a 2-year deal with guard Wyatt Teller. for a team that needed to do a lot on their offensive line this year, I think the Texans have done pretty well. Wyatt Teller's a pretty good guard in the league. Can hopefully come in and kind of stabilize that line. They've made some other pretty key moves in free agency. So, what was looking like a big time need for the Texans, they've started to do well at. So, we'll see if they can continue.
Yeah, they're definitely adding to that position. I think they're taking a different approach than they took last offseason, which is good because it didn't go so well last season. So to see them really building up that O-line is impressive. And it tells me that the narrative of the playoffs for the Texans last year was very much, is CJ Stroud a franchise quarterback? Is he the guy? Does he have what it takes to lead this team? And rebuilding the O-line tells me the Texans' answer to that unequivocally is yes. They know that he needs better protected, he needs more time in the pocket, and if they can get him that help, he will be their guy. So, I have a lot of respect for this, and I'm glad to see them finally doing it.
Yeah. Another move was the Detroit Lions have signed edge DJ Wanham to a 1-year deal worth $6 million. He's a fine edge player, will be depth on the Lions, just another body in the rotation.
Yeah. When you have Hutchinson, you're looking for depth rather than genuine great playmakers.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the reality.
And then the Eagles made another move, and that is trading a 2027 7th round pick to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for quarterback Andy Dalton. I think the Eagles needed a backup quarterback, so there he is. He'll be the Eagles' backup. There's worse backups in the league, so for the Eagles, a 7th round pick to get your backup's not a bad thing. So,
yeah. They needed one. I think they had Pickens for part of last year. I don't remember.
I think.
But Dalton's a long tenured veteran in the league. He fits into every room really well. So, and hopefully he brings a little energy to that room. I think they could use that.
Yeah. And then another move that was made was the Cleveland Browns signed defensive end AJ Epinesa to a 1-year deal. Epinesa is a fine player, just struggled to stay healthy in his career. And again, this is another depth piece. The Browns' pass rush is pretty stacked. Obviously, you have Myles Garrett. So another guy on that defensive line.
Yeah. The Browns tend to not struggle at that position, but wanting depth, especially when Garrett isn't on the field, is always a good thing. And much like great pass rushers before and after him, they do tend to have injury issues. So to be a relief player and a good player is always good. So
yeah. And then 2 more pieces of breaking news. We have a couple of retirings. First of which is cornerback Darius Slay has announced his retirement. Good football player, has been in the league a long time, has done a lot. So congrats on his retirement.
Yeah, congratulations. Glad he's ending it on his terms, hopefully healthy, and can kind of begin the next chapter of his life. But like you said, great player.
And then the other one is linebacker Logan Wilson has announced his retirement. Came into the league in 2020. Obviously spent most of his career with Cincinnati before he was traded to the Cowboys this year. But he's hanging him up. Again, hope for the best for him in retirement.
Yeah, a little bit of a shorter career, especially that we see at linebacker position. So hopefully he goes into this next chapter happy and healthy, and this being the right decision for him and his family.
Yeah. But that is it for breaking news.
Not nearly as much as we've had last week, so that's exciting. Yeah. We will now move on to the Ravens. We have had a couple of signings. Well, we've had one signing, a couple of contracts kick in, And then we're going to talk about Max Crosby's telling of kind of what happened in Baltimore, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So starting off, they signed center Danny Pinter to a 1-year, $2.25 million contract with a max value of $2.75 million. He is a former Colt. I don't know that this is meant to be their answer at center. He has, I think, played 10 games in his career. He has caught a touchdown pass with the Colts, and I know that's always very exciting when O-linemen catch footballs. But there are health concerns there. There is a history of health, like injuries and things like that. So we will see. I do think there's still a wide open spot for someone to take in terms of the draft or in training camp. So we shall see. As for contracts that kind of kicked underway, we had 6. Kyle Hamilton, $17 million, 2027 salary is now fully guaranteed. $9 million of Travis Jones, 2027 salary is guaranteed. $5 million of Mark Andrews, 2027 salary is guaranteed. Marlon Humphrey earned a $4 million roster bonus. I do believe that was partially in a contract restructuring. Roquan Smith earned a $4 million roster bonus, and Justice Hill earned a $250,000 roster bonus. So probably none of those guys going anywhere. Once you have triggers occur, they tend to not be available trade pieces. So I would expect all of them to remain Ravens going into the 2026-2027 year. What happens up until the trade deadline? Never know, but usually those pieces aren't on the table. And then finally, I want to talk Max Crosby a little bit. You all know, if you follow, he does have his own podcast called The Rush. He did an episode a couple days ago talking about his experience in Baltimore, that he flew into DC, I believe, and then had to drive the rest of the way to Baltimore. When he got there, it took about 5 hours for him to see EDC or Jesse Minter. And then when they saw him, Max says that the vibe seemed off, even though he was told the deal would get done. And then shortly thereafter, with his family in tow, he was told they would not be going through with the trade. He wasn't happy with the way things went, the way he was treated, the way the situation was handled, which is completely understandable. I have 2 thoughts on this. This isn't meant to be wishy-washy, but I believe it's one of 2 things. Either when he got there, they were talking to the doctors. They were actively having that conversation and trying to figure out exactly what they felt, how they thought he was going to do, and I think some calls to the Raiders in terms of if they could restructure the trade. The other thought and potential concern is that the best part of their culture and the best part of their franchise, which I have for a very long time respected, and I think has kept a lot of fans in Baltimore, is now in New York. Because I have a hard time imagining John Harbaugh lets a player land in Baltimore and waits 5 hours to go see him. I struggle to think that that's the culture that they've set, but I'm not sure if that culture is the Ravens or John Harbaugh. As for the Max Crosby situation, I do still think it's telling that no other team has traded for him. And as of right now, there don't appear to be any negotiations going on. All I can do is go off what's being reported, but that is interesting to me. It does tell me that I think there is more up with the knee than we thought. I'm not saying he won't play this year, but he is getting older. How many years does he have left in him? I do have concerns about the way Baltimore handled this situation. And hearing Max Crosby's telling of things without a rebuttal, which we know Baltimore's not going to give, I have concerns about what this new culture is going to look like and what the standard in this building is right now. So, some things to continue to keep an eye on. I'm hoping our entire culture and mentality did not go to New York. I'm hoping this was, they weren't trying to ignore him. They were trying to make sure when they saw him, they had all of the information. They knew exactly what they were going to do. It just didn't work out that way. But the optics of this aren't getting better for Baltimore. And we keep everything really close to the vest and everything in-house. It's not currently working for them. So, maybe time to make a mild adjustment. Still no Lamar contract. Still not currently nervous about that fact. We shall see.
I didn't watch the Crosby thing, so I'm not going to speak on it. Frankly, I don't care that much at this point.
Fair enough.
Not my team,
well, then that
not my
will do
problem.
it. That will do it for the Baltimore Ravens, and we will kick it over to Seattle and the Seahawks.
Yeah, the Seahawks made a couple re-signings and signings. Start with the first. They're bringing back corner Shamar Jean-Charles. He was on the practice squad pretty much the whole season last year. I expect him to just be a depth corner, but he can come in, kind of fight in that corner room. Obviously, is a little short-handed after losing Tariq Woolen, so this could be his opportunity with a good camp to maybe make the roster, but we'll see. They also added another corner from outside, and I apologize, I'm probably going to butcher the last name. I think this is how you say it. I'm not 100% sure, but it's Noah Igbenogany. They signed him to a one-year deal, has spent time with the Commanders, was drafted by the Dolphins in the first round. Not someone that I expect to do a whole ton, but it is kind of a flyer the Seahawks were willing to take. Obviously, when you're a first-round draft pick, you have talent, and I think for me, trusting this coaching staff to maybe try to to maximize talent is something they've proven they can do. And with a guy like this, I think that is an option. So I don't hate the signing. It's like a 1 year, $2 million deal. It's not a whole ton. So I think it's a fine flyer to take. Again, I think it's just adding depth to the corner position and just letting these guys kind of battle it out once we get to camp here in a couple months. So there's that. They're also re-signing Chaz Surratt, a linebacker. Spent most of the season on the 53 and was just a special teams guy. Did a lot of good work on special teams. Got hurt towards the end of the year and spent the rest of the season on IR. But a decent backup linebacker, good special teamer. Had the block that led to the Torrey Horton punt return touchdown. So not a bad guy to keep in the building for the Seahawks. And then they also re-signed wide receiver Cody White. Another special teams guy, did have one touchdown catch in the Commanders game, but also got hurt and had to spend the rest of the season on IR. So we'll see how he comes into camp. But the Seahawks just bringing back a lot of guys kind of from the bottom of the roster, which is kind of surprising. I feel like you don't see that a lot with Super Bowl teams. It's those bottom of the roster guys that hit free agency that tend to get picked up the quickest, just because teams want to replicate what the Seahawks have done, and they see guys at the bottom of the roster and be like, yo, you're a Super Bowl winner. We're going to bring you in and see if you can't start for us. So it is pretty impressive that they were able to keep as many of those as they've been able to. But that's it for the re-signings. Again, not a whole lot. One outside signing, I think that makes 3 at this point. Don't expect a whole ton more, honestly, until we get to the draft. I think the Seahawks are playing the comp pick game at this point and are trying to set themselves up for next year having a bunch of picks. I think they would be scheduled for 12 in next year's draft. So um, I kind of expect that to be the plan going forward. But once you hit the draft, that no longer matters. So maybe we'll start seeing more moves then. Um, but there's one more piece of news, and that is we did get confirmation on that the Seahawks will kick off the season as is tradition for the Super Bowl winners. They will kick it off Wednesday, September 9th. And then the first ever Australia game will be played that Thursday, September 10th. So the Seahawks will kick off the season on Wednesday, as it should be. Should be pretty cool. I cannot remember a Wednesday kickoff in the NFL. So kind of interesting. Glad the NFL did stick with keeping the Seahawks as the first game of the season. Again, it is tradition. But with the Australia game, you kind of knew that had to be on a Thursday just because of the travel restrictions there. So kind of interesting. Should be good. But that gives you an idea as well that the NFL season will kick off September 9th this year. So we are still quite a ways away, but it'll be there soon enough. So, but that is it. The Seahawks have just kind of been doing their thing this offseason, enjoying the Lombardi. So can't ask for much more.
No, that's a great way to have the off season.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. Well, any other sports?
Yeah, so we talked last week that the World Baseball Classic was going on, and then the final was played yesterday. It was between Team Venezuela and Team USA. Venezuela gets the win 3-2. This is Venezuela's first ever World Baseball Classic win. So congrats to them. It was a pretty good game. Venezuela kind of dominated the whole game. And then Bryce Harper ended up hitting a 2-run home run for the USA in the 8th inning to kind of make it close. And then Venezuela won in the 9th inning off of a base hit from Eugenio Suarez. So congrats to him. Congrats to Team Venezuela for taking home the World Baseball Classic. It was a good game. It was a good tournament. Always fun as like a preseason thing for baseball.
Yeah, I've caught, very little of it. Very, very little. But I have caught some of it. It's been interesting. I didn't realize this was something they did. It also kind of makes me wish baseball was a little more global, a little more often. So
yeah, it was an awesome tournament. It was very interesting to see kind of how teams were built. Considering that there's very few true baseball countries that can field like a whole roster. So it's kind of interesting to see teams like Canada, Great Britain, Italy be able to field true rosters or make a pretty decent push, especially for Italy, making it to the semifinals and having a really good run was pretty cool. So, yeah, I think they do this once every 2 years. I think might be every year, but yeah, it's a cool tournament. It does make baseball somewhat tolerable sometimes, but fun things.
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I wish it was something they did a little more, especially because they call it the World Series. I'm like, this is a little more global, so
yeah,
kind of exciting to see some of those other countries get to represent, and global tournaments are always fantastic. So
yes, so pretty cool. I think that was the only random sport, unless you had one.
I did not.
All right. Well, then I think that does it for us this week. It is a shorter episode this week. Just not a whole ton to talk about in the NFL. and then we're getting caught up on the NHL and NBA.
Yep.
Now that we've done that, should be caught up, should be good to go going forward. Obviously, playoffs are coming up here in about a month and a half, I think, for both of those sports. So, should be great. But yeah, with all that being said, make sure to like, subscribe, comment. Now that we're in kind of the dead part of sports, let us know if there's anything you would like us to talk about, whether it's more hockey, more basketball.
There's a different sport.
If there's a different sport. With the NCAA tournament going on, we'll probably talk about that a lot. But yeah, just let us know. But yeah, with all that being said, like, subscribe. This has been Floxnet Sports Podcast. Thank you all for joining. Peace.
Bye.